Hello and welcome back to Sundays in the Garden. My name is Sarah and on this channel I share all of the things that I get up to in my English cottage garden in the United Kingdom. I share things like weekly garden vlogs and different jobs to do at different times of the year and different seeds to sow at different times of the year. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing so you stay up to date with that and we can get the jobs done together. Today I'm going to share 10 important jobs to get done in the garden in November. Number 1. Mulch and cover your raised beds. If you've got raised beds in the garden and you're not going to be planting any cover crops this year, it's a great time of year to dig them over, cover with cardboard and some fresh compost, and then cover them up, ready for the next growing season. Number 2. Plant your onions and garlic. First, dig a hole about 6 centimetres deep. Pop the onion in the hole and cover well. Onions don't need planting very deep at all, and they're in rows 5 to 10 centimetres apart. Then the final job of watering, always a ready helper here. Next, we're planting our garlic. And as with onions, this is a great time of year to be planting your garlic. Here, I'm explaining to my little boy how we grow garlic from the individual cloves of a garlic bulb. He's helping me count out how many cloves we've got to plant today. I lay the bulbs where I want to plant them. This is the way up you want to plant your garlic clove. This is the base where the roots will come from, and the pointy section at the top is where the green growth will come from. Place the root section in first and cover with soil, about 5 to 6 centimetres deep. Then repeat the process for the rest of your garlic cloves. And in a few weeks' time, they'll look like this. Number 3. Wash your pots and trays once they're clear of summer annuals. Once you've removed any of your annual plants this year, it's a great idea to wash your pots with some bubbly water, just to make sure they're nice and clean and they're not harbouring any disease, ready for the next growing season. Once they're nice and clean, just pop them somewhere to dry and they'll be ready for next year. Number 4. Plant up your daffodils and other bulbs in pots and borders. Planting daffodils in pots and borders is a promise for some beautiful spring colour in the new year. Number 5. Lift and store your dahlia tubers. As you can see, the dahlias are starting to look rather tired now. This one still has a tiny bit of life left in it, but it's nearly time to lift them. This one's finished, so I'm removing the old foliage and the majority of the stem, leaving about 2 or 3 inches sticking out of the soil. I lift it and begin to remove as much of the soil as I can, taking extra care not to damage any of the tubers because they are very delicate. I'm really pleased with the amount of growth that this plant has put on this year. The tubers are really quite large. I store upside down to allow the water to drain out of the stem. And then once it's dried completely after 2 or 3 days, it will be stored in some sawdust in a cool, dry place. And on to number 6 now, start feeding your garden birds. Bird flu is very sadly still with us this year, so it's never been more important to make sure that the water trays and feeding stations are kept clean and fresh. As we move into the cooler months, the birds will need some extra feeding to keep them going over winter, so make sure that any feeding stations are kept clean and washed at least once a week. Refreshing food every few days also helps to maintain the hygiene when the flu epidemic is still ongoing, and making sure they have fresh water, which is changed daily if possible, really helps them at this time of year. If you notice it's frozen over, make sure you remove the ice and fill with fresh water so that the birds can access some drinking water at this cold time of year. They'll really thank you. Number 7. Clear leaves with any signs of disease. It's really important at this time of year to remove any leaves that are showing signs of black spot, red spot or any other disease. Dispose of the leaves in your brown bin or a rubbish sack. not in your compost, because you don't want the disease to overwinter and come back next year. The same applies for removing any leaves from the garden floor. You don't want the disease to overwinter in the soil and return next year. On to number 8, and it's also time to insulate the greenhouse. Not everyone chooses to insulate your greenhouse, but if you do, you can either use a greenhouse heater or, as I have often done in the past, you could use some bubble wrap. Bubble wrap is really easy and cost effective to use. You can just simply stick it to the roof of your greenhouse or the sides of your greenhouse, and any crops you're overwintering in the greenhouse will be protected from the worst of the weather. Number 9, and November is also the time for planting your tulip bulbs. My tulip bulbs this year are from Farmer Gracie, and I've got quite a few that I'm going to plant in a tulip border, which I'll share with you in the coming weeks. But this variety, Finola, I'm going to be planting into pots. First, take a 20cm pot and fill it up to 1/3 of its height with some compost. Then pop up to 10 tulip bulbs into your pot. They can be packed much tighter in pots than they are in the ground. Fill the pot to the top with compost, cover with some grit, and then find a sheltered spot in the garden where you can leave your pot for the winter. Don't forget to mix some grit in with your compost to help with drainage. And in at number 10, my final gardening job for November, rake up your leaves and create some leaf mould. Leaves provide some much needed warmth and protection for your soil and any bulbs over the winter period. When leaves break down, they also create leaf mould, which is really nutritious for your garden. So you've really got two options here. You can either bag up your leaves and leave them somewhere over the winter to break down and create some beautiful leaf mould to put on your garden, or you can move the leaves to an area that you want to keep warm and protected during the winter and leave them to break down naturally. And that concludes our 10 gardening jobs for November.